expert conversations from the world of cybersecurity. It's the Cyber Circuit, powered by Insight Jam.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back. This is episode number 4 of the Cyber Circuit, Insight Jam's home for all things cybersecurity in the AI age. I'm your host, Ryan Daly, and before we kick it off, before we really get going, of course, hey, you're watching this on YouTube. We've just recently hit the 1 million subscriber mark, so go ahead and be that million and first or whatever number we're up to. We'd love to have you. Stay in touch with us and stay abreast of all the content we have going here in enterprise technology on the Insight Jam YouTube channel. Now let's get to it. Returning to the show, we've got Michael Morgenstern. Michael, welcome back. It's great to have you.
Thanks, Ryan. Great to be back.
Absolutely. And with Michael, we've got the former CISO of Levi Strauss. Perhaps you've heard of it. And we've got Steve Zalewski. Steve, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Looking forward to the conversation.
All right. So was chatting with you folks a little bit ahead of the show. We're talking AI and identity today. The concept of identity, I'm sure, goes back thousands of years, probably predates humanity. Well, I'm not sure. I can't pinpoint it on a timeline, but it's old. It's old, but it is rapidly changing. Yeah, in the face of AI. Michael, I think we were talking, said something about maybe 80-1 actual human identities versus non-human identities, and that got my mind racing and maybe a little scared. So maybe you can talk me off the ledge a little bit. Are we losing the identity wars? Are we going to be just phased out of existence, or how can we think about this?
Thanks, Ryan. I'm excited to be back and to talk about the intersection of AI and identity. I've been working in identity for organizations like Steve's for many years now, and AI is only making this problem massively more difficult and more intractable. Not just because of AI itself and LLMs and agents, but because all the non-human identities that are associated with it, and growing because of it. Like you mentioned, we're seeing 80+ to 1 ratios. I recently published an article at Dark Reading on the growing challenge of AI and NHI management, and a lot of the information that we'll be talking about today can be found in greater depth there and in another paper at the Cloud Security Alliance on AI identity and access management. So there is a lot to talk about. I'm glad to have an expert here with me. Steve, over to you to introduce yourself, please.
Sure. So, hi, folks. Pleasure. Steve Zalewski, former CISO Levi Strauss. And kind of my tagline at Levi's when I was there talking about identity or anything with security was, how does it sell more jeans? It's a business value proposition. It's not a security problem anymore. And I spent about 25 years in cybersecurity. So I've been large healthcare, large utilities, large international retailer. And I spent the first half of my career actually on the founder side building products. So that's a little bit about me and kind of what I bring to the conversation as we talk about this topic.
I'm excited to learn more about it. So Michael, I'm going to hand it off to you and get out of your way. I'll be back at the end to check in, but really, really looking forward to this, and I know I'm going to learn a lot. So thank you.
Thanks, Ryan. Steve, again, thanks for being here. Depending on how this conversation goes, let's tackle 3 topics. I think we should start with agent identity. We should talk about non-human identity, and then maybe move into paradigm for how to understand the different types, the different risks, and the different business values associated with each of those risks or with mitigation of those risks. Let's start with agents. Traditional identity and access management systems were designed for human and static machine identities, not for protocols like OAuth or OpenID Connect or SAML, which seems to me to be making them very inadequate for the kind of ephemeral nature of AI systems that we're seeing, particularly those at companies that are doing this at scale. Is the sky falling? Are we, are our IT teams and security teams getting in front of this yet? Are we still, where on the maturity curve do you think we are here?
So I want to start with taking a step back for a minute, right? And as a former engineer or coming from an engineering background, I always say, let's define the problem first. Let's agree that we're on the same page for what AI means and these AI agents and what problem we're trying to solve. And so I go, so why are we having this conversation today? And they say, because we've been solving identity and access management for 30 years. It's existed for as long as security. Why do we do this? Because if we don't know who has access to what, if we can't assign that fundamental capability, then all of my security controls are garbage in, garbage out. Okay. Because everything is aligned to that identity and what it is. So if I don't have a good foundational appreciation for who has access to what, I can't put firewall rules in place. I can't put data protection rules in place. That is at its basis what we're trying to do. And for 30 years, we've been working at it with humans. So if we jump to what we'll call AI agents now, we'll go to what AI is, which is now we're creating a digital persona, okay, a digital identity, so to speak, because we've got this piece of technology that we're saying is not capable of just doing a static exercise of retrieving some information, where an API is a sufficient interface. But it can generate insights. It can do a set of repetitively complex tasks to be able to get an outcome. So what we're saying now is we have to assign it an identity so that we can validate that this complex process workflow that is an AI agent, that we know who it is and we know what it's allowed to do for all of the places that the data exists that it's going to touch. Okay. And again, you would then say, well, that's not a hard thing, Steve. So you've created this thing called a digital identity, and you have all these identity and access management capabilities, as you've described, Michael, which was single sign-on and OAuth, and we use tools like Okta, and we have privileged access management. Now we're looking at the API interfaces, or for folks that are familiar, MCP, which is an emerging standard that is better able to reflect how an AI agent and its capability of running complex workflows and insights and reasoning against data, we're able to establish that identity and the entitlements since it is recursive. And that means we have to do it in different places in the solution stack, not up at the human identity level, much lower down at the API level, and now even lower than the API level at the data service edge. So from my perspective, what you're challenging the environment or the community is not to change the fundamental appreciation of what IAM is, but we have to do it at a different level in the technical architecture stack. And that's requiring both innovation on the technical side to be able to put the policy enforcement points, policy decision points, policy information points in place, as well as us actually understanding what the business workflows look like to establish what those entitlements even look like once we have the capability to do it.
Wow. So I'm glad we're talking about this
Sorry.
today, because as you as you said pretty clearly, I mean, this problem is getting bigger and bigger. So do you think we're going to solve it with process? We're going to solve it with new tech. We're going to solve it with better education of our IT and security professionals, or even better education of the whole workforce so that they understand that there are identities associated with assets now, not just with humans, or with code, not just with humans. Like, where do we dig in to start to find the solution set?
When I started this, I said when I was at Levi Strauss, right, my responsibility was not to secure the company. It wasn't even to protect the business. It was to sell more jeans. Security as a function had an accountability to understand where cybersecurity had a fundamental role in establishing where a cyber attack could impact the key business processes that would result in a negative outcome. right? Either I can't make money or I compromise my consumer data. That's where we're coming from. So when you ask me that, the first thing I say is, you're talking about people, process, and technology. I'm talking about what is the business value that AI is bringing, so that once I understand how it's integrating into a business process, I'm able to understand what are the cybersecurity controls, identity and access management in this case, that are appropriate for me to apply relative to understanding how it is interacting in the business process. Because what I'm about to do is introduce friction. Okay. Security fundamentally is friction on an efficient business process. I used to joke, I go, nobody does security because they want to. Okay. It's like brushing your teeth. It is hygiene, but it has an important play because if you don't do it, the outcome can be very detrimental to the business. Okay. So you see how, well, the first thing I'm doing now is I'm saying, let's pivot to understand why the business sees AI important for what it does. Then let's understand that's a digital identity, because I have to be able to protect the company from that digital identity and AI either accidentally doing something that is detrimental to the company, or a bad guy attacking me and maliciously doing something that's detrimental to the company. Okay. Social engineering attacks coming in to do this, or a ransomware attack because they establish vulnerability, because they weaponized AI for offense. Okay. So I start there when you ask me, because again, from an engineering perspective, I say, let's understand how we're going to solve the problem and why the problem is important for me to then determine how much friction the company, the business is willing to accept in solving that problem. And within that constraints, kind of as an insurance policy or set of insurance policies, what am I doing with that money and that legitimate opportunity to apply friction, to be able to use compensating controls to be able to manage where I can't do more, because I'll never be able to do as much as I want. So I go, so let's start that way. From an AI perspective, how do I allow Michael, as my data scientist, who wants to see all the data in the company, because he doesn't know what correlations are going to result in grabbing all this data that could be a legitimate insight that the business cares about. So how do I now, right, as the CISO, give Michael the right access through this AI agent, so to speak, that's doing all this correlation, pure data protection capability? And so if that's my problem, we can solve that problem. Okay. Then we go to stage 2, which is Gen AI. Okay. Generative AI we talk about. What generative AI does is it says, given a whole bunch of data, okay, and given a prompt, I can generate some compelling content on that prompt for you. Okay. I call it a compelling story, but it doesn't mean it's truthful. It just means it answers the question based on how I've been trained to answer the question with the data set that I have. Okay. Now, how do I train that generative AI? Because it's a form of digital identity. And now what data is it allowed to see, both to be able to build the training model, and when Michael, you generate the prompt, how do I make sure that the prompts that you're feeding the model are appropriate based on who you are and what your roles are? Because the model's going to respond to all the data it was trained on, but you may not have the rights to necessarily see everything that it was trained on. What do we do? Now, I'm not trying to solve it yet. What we're saying is see how we can decompose the problem of what that digital identity is compared to the human identity, because now what I have is a correlation. I have to know Michael is the human, and I have to know the generative AI model as a form of digital identity that has rights and knowledge. And I have to be able to look at the two and figure out what is the right intersection of roles to make sure I get the right outcome. And that doesn't mean now compelling content that's right just technically, but it's right within the constraints of what you're allowed to access. who you are and the points you're in. Okay. We go stage 2. Then we get to stage 3, which is what we're talking about here, which is agentic workflows. It's the ability now not to just tell a compelling story and not the ability to do large correlation of data and generate insights, but let's put all of those capabilities together and allow the workflows to be recursive. Okay, to be able to let it go through exercises of generating an insight. Based on insight, tell a compelling story. Based on a compelling story, go back into thinking again to look at more data to be able to generate subsequent insights to get to an outcome. So complex workflows. So now the way I think about that is look at a security operations center and your analysts. Okay. That's what they're doing now is they're running complex workflows. And so now I have this agentic workflow capability that's starting to approach what looks like a primitive human identity. That AI agent has different profiles and different entitlements or roles that it has to have as a digital identity, like Michael as a human identity, has different responsibilities in the business. And you go, so those are the 3 stages, if you want to break it down, of how digital identity is being introduced into, right, the security component of what is my accountability to let the business leverage AI in those 3 business examples. And then how do I establish authentication and authorization to be able to have it operate in effectively, consistently more independent roles? And so now what you're seeing is that digital identity is becoming a form of resource that I manage.
Want more Inside Jam? Subscribe to our YouTube channel for shorts, panels, podcasts, and more. In your shorts feed, enjoy a daily dose of best practices from tech experts and leading solution providers, while long-form panel discussions and keynotes, recorded live every quarter, go deep on important industry topics. And don't miss our collection of regular podcasts, keeping you informed on the latest trends. We're hard at work collecting the best enterprise technology information from around the globe, so subscribe to be notified of our next upload. Now, let's get back to the show.
Here's a challenge that I've been grappling with. I'd love to hear you opine on it. And you set up pieces of it in your comments. We see different stages of, I've seen, and several of my collaborators and co-authors have defined different stages of agents, starting with an interactive agent, which I'll wave my hands and say is the next generation of robotic process automation, right? Here's a particular task or a group of tasks that are related, and here's some data associated with those tasks. Go and in somewhat an autonomous way, use the data to manage and answer those tasks. That particular, the identity of that agent, the non-human identity of that agent, to me is relatively closed-ended. It's in a box. If the human employee had the right to do those tasks, and the human employee had appropriate authorization or appropriate authentication, appropriate authorization, then the agent that is taking a non-human identity is a subset in general of the rights of that human. Again, in a box for me. Here's where many of my colleagues and peers disagree with me, so I'll say this, that I know it's contentious, but when you go to the extreme and you replace the human with an agent, what the RPA companies were calling, digital employees back, that never came to fruition, but maybe now with AI, we're getting closer. You have a digital employee. The digital employee has a group of jobs, not a single job, and has rights just like a human would have, or maybe not the same rights as a human, but at least a set of rights, just like we would assign a human a set of rights. We would assign the digital employee a set of rights. And therefore, an identity operating with those rights seems reasonable to me. Okay, so here's where my problem is. It's in between those two. It's in the intermediate stage that we're starting to approach today, which is the autonomous agent, right? The autonomous agent that can get asked things from multiple humans, each of which have their own identity, and then that agent either needs to have the right to create a non-human identity to associate as a subset with each of those human rights, or that agent needs to be able to say, I'm sorry, you don't have the right to do it, or that non-human or that agent, sorry, has to have root, right? Which we're never doing, right? Help me solve this, or clarify me, or tell me where my thinking is wrong, because I've been spinning on this with a bunch of people for 6 months now. I've seen nobody solving this out in the world of creating these autonomous agents that can assume multiple identities seamlessly yet, but I still think it's coming. So let's talk about this.
So in characterizing what you said, so here's Steve's, again, simple view is I listened to you, you're my business. You said, this is what I want to do. Steve, make it happen from a security perspective. I said, all right, we are challenged at this point because we have people, process, and technology. The technology, as we've been describing here, isn't up to snuff yet to be able to implement digital identities into the solution architecture down at the levels that it has to be at. We're working on it. That's where the innovation is coming. Okay. But then I say, if I look at the process, I go, since what AI is really good is consistently executing tasks that humans have historically executed, but they can do it faster and they make less mistakes doing it. Okay. Assuming that it is a process that is established by a human and we're just simply augmenting the human. So we're driving the conversation around efficiency. Let's get more out of the human, right? By removing a lot of the drudgery, which is where RPA came from. Take a drudgery process, okay, and let the technology do it because that's what it does well. Okay. And you go, awesome. So we can go ahead and look at that. But ultimately, I say beyond efficiency, we want to ask the question, how do we improve the effectiveness of the process to sell more jeans? Okay. How am I going to make Michael more effective in his role in the company as a marketing person to be able to put the next sales campaign together? Now, that's where we want to be able to go. So we look at efficiency and effectiveness. We look at the fact that what AI can do, okay, is actually do 3 things faster, not necessarily better, but faster than a human. It can ingest data faster. It can correlate and generate insights off that data faster. And it can take action faster. So you could argue that's the efficiency. So let's just let it do that. But what agentic workflows is it can do that faster, but it can also then therefore work through more permutations faster and potentially see things that a human could eventually see, but not as fast. So we're going to get new insights. That's where knowledge or thinking is. Okay, so I'm going to start with that for people, again, to get comfortable with where's the value. Okay, then we get to the people part. Okay, people are afraid of this because they're going to lose their jobs. Now, that's the brutal truth. Why? Because if you look at a lot of our daily lives, a lot of what we do is routine, repetitive tasks that can be automated, but we don't necessarily want them to be because that's 40 or 60% of our job, but we want to keep our job. And we don't necessarily want to answer the hard question, well, if all of a sudden half my work went away, what would I do with the other half of my day to be more effective in my job, not just more efficient? Okay, there's the friction. Now, as a result of that, as we've been playing with AI, here's the next game. Humans rely on deterministic outcomes. We play checkers. We want to know the game. We want to know the rules. We want to know the moves so that we're always successful. And a lot of work we do is all about making our jobs deterministic, making the outcomes deterministic. You introduce AI. If AI is just making a rote process faster, it's deterministic. You're willing to accept it, and you have to because it makes you more efficient. Okay, and then you got to figure out what to do. But what you hear in the industry is a lot of people saying, oh my God, AI thinks, It reasons. Okay. Now you as a human immediately say, wait a minute, that is non-deterministic. If I hire a new employee and give him a task, I've got to give him the run books and the processes, and I have to build trust over time that he can consistently execute based on the prompt, the run books, and I'm going to evaluate that he gets consistent, trusted outcomes. And as I build that trust in him, giving him the inputs, I'll let them to be more autonomous. But a non-deterministic system scares people, and that's why. So what we just did in the analogy is we went from playing checkers to playing chess. Checkers, on every move, there is the right next move. I can guarantee if I start first, I'll always either win or draw at worst, because there's always a right move. With chess, it isn't that there's the right next move. There is a next move, but you're playing to win. You're using inference. You're looking 100, 200 moves away. You're willing to lose pieces in the short term to win in the long term. And what we've done over the years with all of our processes is we've played this game for thousands of years, and over the times, the masters have gotten good. But when I turn AI loose on it, when I turn computers loose on chess, it found new ways to win, not because it was thinking, but because it was able to look through more permutations of moves with the rules to get to the outcome. So when you talk about an AI agent or an AI worker, where we're making it an independent, autonomous capability, the problem right now is it's non-deterministic. We can't trust it. As soon as it's wrong once, we throw it out because we have a bias to keep our jobs. Yet it has to come in because it's an efficiency play, and therefore the business wants efficiency. But here's now when I say that conundrum can't be solved, it can be. And here's why. What an AI agent is, like we talked about, is it's going to start as your receptionist, right? It's going to do very simple tasks. If you can demonstrate it does these simple tasks consistently while it's non-deterministic because you gave it the process and it learns and it can do a few things, after a year of doing it, you're like, it knows what to do. I can trust it because given the prompt, it executes. So I've taken a non-determinist exercise and it's now deterministic enough through experience that I trust it. Okay. Now we're just going to go through that evolution so that once it's your receptionist, now it's going to be your secretary. You're going to give it more tasks, more complex tasks. You're going to play with it for a while. And in that domain, you're going to get to the point where it becomes good and you're going to trust it to do more and more with limited human intervention, either oversight or direct. And that is going to be a continued process. Whether we get to AI worker or not, what you're now realizing is we're just taking more complexity, RPA. We're establishing a length of time and a prompt set in a business process to be able to determine when we can trust it enough. And as we have more trust in it, we give it more autonomy. And all we're doing now is going through that exercise, just like we as humans when we have a baby, okay? And it's young, we have very limited trust in it. As it gets to be a teenager, as it then goes to college, as it has its first job. So I say we're kind of on the same path. The timeline I'm not sure of, but the path that we're on, now you can see how we can work through that. So every company, every individual, right, the security teams have to evaluate how AI at every one of the stages we talked about has a value, but you control the journey. The business does, you as a CISO do, but now I've taken the fear away of it's a non-deterministic system. I can't trust it. It's going to take my job away to, well, no, let's talk about efficiency and effectiveness. Let's talk about what your job can be and give everybody a chance to understand how AI as a value proposition can be introduced and to manage the fear that a lot of the marketing has introduced with using phrases like learning, okay, and reasoning and decision making. That's the best I can offer.
I like your analogy or direction toward taking baby steps until we build confidence and build trust as an approach to moving forward in a world that we can't define the problem yet, right? Which is really why I struggle with that use case that I offered, because because it's hard to offer an answer if I can't put it in a box, right? I can't build the formula, so I can't solve the equation. So I like this as a way to move forward, given those given those lack of constraints. Let's and we'll headed toward the end, toward the finish line here. Let me rattle off a few issues with agentic identity, agentic AI identity. Maybe you'll pick one or two and opine on what to do next, or a solution set, recognizing we're not going to get through all of them. So, you know, you talked about the positive side of this. I'll throw it out there on the negative side, and maybe trust is time and trust is the answer, and we'll skip this one. But the first issue is unpredictability, right? LLMs are not deterministic the way that human brains are. We don't get to see all the inputs, so we don't. And even if we saw the inputs, we can't always follow the logic, so to speak, right? Because it's not the way that we make correlations in our brains. So there's unpredictability. There's ephemerality, right? These things, we spin them up, we use them, they spin up non-human identities, they use them, they disappear, right? Which makes attribution one of the fundamental responsibilities of in the CISO arsenal more difficult. There's evolution of intent, evolution of capabilities. Not exactly agent. And you made this point early on. Agents aren't thinking the way that we use the word thinking, but they are evolving because they're collecting more data, they're adding more data to that set, and then they're making new inferences based on previous data, right? I've talked a lot about data poisoning and worrying about this as an attack vector, not for today. You touched this one, but I'd love for you to go deeper. Maybe is, we need verifiable provenance and accountability, right? Like, how do you know that the agent took the action versus the human took the action? Or if the agent took the action at the behest of the human, like, we need to dig in there. There's privilege escalation. There's always been privilege escalation. We're always going to be worried about privilege escalation. At least that one feels like we know what we're worried about, even if we don't know how to solve it yet. There's overscoping of permissions. There's cross-agent communication. Maybe the last one is, sometimes agents take actions that don't correlate to human requests, meaning back to your point around, like, the way that the agent is going to solve the problem is not a way that humans ever considered solving a problem. And therefore they may take actions on the infrastructure that have never been seen before. Like, that type of action has never been seen before. It's hard to log, it's hard to monitor, it's hard to do all those things if we don't have any previous examples. I don't know, pick one or two of those, please.
I'll do the best I can. This was like the lightning round here. All legitimate concerns. And what I love about this for most people is, so everything you did is you just took 5 pieces of string and you made a fur ball out of it. Okay. And what we are simply saying is, oh, look at the 5 different or 6 different problems. Oh my God, how do we do this? Because we're understanding there's interrelations. We're understanding people, process, and technology. We're understanding friction. So you threw it all together and go, oh, it looks like I can't do anything about it. Okay. So I go, let me tease it apart. So as an engineer, I go, my job is to take very hard problems that don't seem to be solvable and not to come up with a magic solution that's bang, it's all done. Is let us take a look at the problem and incrementally solve it till we get to an acceptable outcome. So I'm going to tease apart the strings more and more, right? And that's what an enterprise solution is for large problems, because it's not just a technology thing. It's a people, process, of technology. So I start with this. I go, so if we were going to go to AI worker for a minute, we'll just start down that path, right? And about the fear of non-deterministic, and it's going to go do things. I said, in Steve's simple mind, here's what we're acknowledging today. AI agents and the first gen of AI worker are fundamentally executing existing human processes and runbooks, right? Where we know what deterministic outcome looks like. So we've already figured out what it is, and we're training it to act the way that we act. Okay. And what we said earlier, the speed of ingestion, the speed of insight, and the speed of action allows us to take the human process and the human outcome that we know, test it, and it might come up with a few new ideas. I'll call it ideas because it can see more breadth, more depth, just go faster. So a human would have eventually done it. Okay. 1,000 humans at a task will come up with those as well. It's just we don't have 1,000 humans. And so therefore, it is just the equivalent of more humans to be able to see more data coming in, either ingestion of old or ingestion of new, to be able to get to the insights. We're not going to be afraid of that. We'll go down that path. Okay. But where it can lead to is, what if we now have a super child? We know that we have a genius, and we take a foundational model with the agentic workflows and we say, hey, you're a genius. So what we're going to do is we're going to load you with everything that we as humans have done and have learned how to do in the last 30 years to be a SOC analyst. And now we're going to turn you loose as not the execution of the processes and evaluated for that, but we're going to let you now, given that as knowledge, go think about how you want to solve the problem, not just solve the problem better for the problem as we have decided it needs to be solved. Okay. And that's where people get very uncomfortable now. That's where you're getting to. Totally non-deterministic. Now we're afraid of what its potential outcome is. And I go, yep. And I agree with everybody. Then you get to the social issues, right? Of, oh my God, I've got this identity. How do I only let it work a certain amount of time? How do I know how to protect it? You enter this really interesting set of social accountability, responsibility conversations that you talked about. Okay. And I say, okay, that's where you're going. This is where we as a society are coming to grips with technology's interaction with our societal norms and deciding what are the rules of engagement, how are we comfortable. So I go say, okay, taking it that way, again, it's a journey. We can decompose it now because we can understand, okay? But then I add this. It's one thing to look at how a business sells more genes, okay? And we have accountability for the speed of adoption of AI. We're going for it. But I want to put my security hat on for a minute. Okay. And I go, look, the bad guys that are attacking my company and trying to do harm and put me out of business have no issue with going right to AI worker. The weaponization of AI for offense is game on. And they have made incredible gains because they have nothing holding them back. And so I, as a CISO now, have to figure out, how do I weaponize AI for defense? Because I'm not now worrying about the business trying to find market advantage to sell more genes. I'm trying to keep my company alive, and the attackers have absolutely no social qualms about leveraging all this technology. So how do I have to enable agentic workflows and AI agents? Because I've got to be able to weaponize AI for defense in a different way than it's weaponized for AI for offense. But if I don't, I'm guaranteed to lose. I cannot put enough humans at it because they are using everything we're doing today. And so that's also, from a security perspective, putting me on a defensive posture where I have to adopt AI, whether I like it or not, because my competition has done it. Therefore, I have to, because I can't win the war or even reestablish an equivalent defensive perimeter without it. That's it.
Unlock better leads through Solutions Review events.
Welcome to Data Demo Day. Expert Roundtable, Solution Spotlight featuring Monte Carlo, Cohesity, Denodo, Cloudflare, High Gear, Broadcom, Next Thing.
Boost your brand with a webinar that shares comprehensive use cases, real-time product demos, and an interactive Q&A. All broadcast live to LinkedIn, YouTube, and Zoom from our Boston studio, or even on location. Fill your sales funnel with high-quality targeted leads and contact us today by visiting solutionsreview.com/virtual events.
Steve, why don't you let us know if people do have questions for you, if they want to know more, where can they go and find you?
Yeah, sure. So for those who want to, LinkedIn, the easiest way, that is our business Rolodex, right? So you just go, you can look me up on LinkedIn, send me a note, happy to connect, happy to chat, or, if you want to take advantage of the advisory services that I offer at this stage, please feel free. So my obligation to everybody listening is, at this stage in my career, paying it back and paying it forward and using my knowledge and experience to be able to, as a security community, focus on protecting our businesses against the bad guy. And let's go down that path, and I'm here to help.
All right, excellent. And that those links will be right down below to LinkedIn right there. And Michael, where should folks reach out to you?
And as always, you can find me at stablyconsulting.com. For this episode, again, I'll plug Agentic AI, Identity and Access Management, the new approach, which is a publication of the Cloud Security Alliance. And I've got a new guest editorial up at Dark Reading on NHI and AI.
Excellent. So yeah, if you're watching this, continue that learning. Links right down below. And hey, while you're down there, of course, hit that thumbs up, hit that bell, like this video, subscribe. It helps us out. It helps other people find the show. And it helps the channel grow, which it has been doing. And hey, now you're a part of it. So thank you for that. Until next time, for Michael Morgenstern, for Steve Zalewski, I've been Ryan Daly, and we'll see you on the next Cyber Circuit. Thank you.
Powered by Insight Jam.